Evening, everyone. So you'll have to go gently with me because this is my first ever webinar. So forgive any errors I make. I want to start off by getting a bit of an understanding for how many of you know about creating a portfolio or portfolio analysis. So I have a little question I want you to answer, and so it's really how many of you have a portfolio, and it's just a yes/no. So if you wouldn't mind indulging me and just answering that so I can get a feeling for what sort of audience I'm chatting to. So if you can go ahead with that. Okay, we're almost done there. A couple of you still outstanding. 87% of the way there, so there's one or two of you who are just holding us up there. If you wouldn't mind just clicking the vote. Okay, we're going to close off that poll. Thank you very much. So it looks like we've got a pretty much a mixed bag here, because we've got a sort of almost half-half split between people who have got portfolios and people who don't have portfolios. Okay, so I'm going to take it quite gently then, because half of our audience haven't created portfolios before. So my brief tonight was to explain to you how to create a diversified portfolio. So creating a diversified portfolio, I'm going to start off with a little bit of theory. So what is diversification? So clearly, when you create a portfolio, you want to put together the right mix of shares. Those are shares that list on the JSE, bonds, property, and cash. Those are typically the main building blocks of your diversified portfolio. This is called your asset allocation. And really a lot of your variability and performance in your portfolio comes directly from this asset allocation. And there's this general rule of thumb which says that this is the most difficult part of putting together a portfolio, is actually choosing the asset allocation, and that the stock picking is actually the easy bit. So it's about not having all your eggs in one basket. So having a lot of shares doesn't mean you're diversified. You tend to go for variety, not quantity. So having 100 shares in your portfolio that are all the same actually doesn't make you diversified at all. It gives you a lot of risk on the same type of stock. So what you want to do is have a bit of a spread of shares in your portfolio. And I'll get to that a little bit later. I've got some examples on that. So clearly we want shares, bonds, property, listed property, international, and cash in that portfolio. So let's just go through those little bits, those buckets in more detail. So cash, typically you always have cash in a portfolio because there's typically some fees, you want some liquidity, it has the lowest risk in your portfolio, and it has the highest level of liquidity. So you tend to want to have this because there's always that little event that you have to pay for. So you've either got to pay for some school fees, you need to dip into your portfolio, or you need to buy a new car, and you need to disinvest out of your portfolio. So cash is quite important because it gives you liquidity. Bonds, otherwise known as fixed interest, they bring you the interest component. That's the income in your portfolio. So if you're someone who needs to live off a portfolio that has some income, that you need some income from it, you tend to put quite a lot of bonds in because that will give you an interest yield. Problem with bonds is they tend to be fairly low risk and don't give you a massive performance. But we'll come back to that one a little bit just now. Property is also important, listed property, and there's a couple of ways you can do this, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But property tends to be your protection against inflation, and it also tends to have a low correlation. That means it doesn't do the same thing as the other shares in your portfolio. But property tends to be medium to high risk, and depending on the interest rate cycle, could actually lose you money. So you put a bit of property in there, but not too much. And I'll get to that weightings a little bit later. And then equity. Clearly, equity shares are the powerhouse. They're the engine in your portfolio. This is what's going to drive most of your performance. But equities, they tend to be the highest risk part of your investment or your portfolio, and you need to take the longest term view on this.